Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Morphy's taking a look at a Mauser Model 90 DA, which isn't really a Mauser at all. This is a rebranded Hungarian P9R pistol. Now, in the 1980s and definitely by the 1990s, the Mauser company was really adrift. They didn't have a good production plan. They didn't have a good vision for what they wanted to be doing. They didn't really have a lot of products to work with. They had some old legacy things. They had Luger, they had the HSC. None of this stuff was very popular anymore. And Mauser, not having any better ideas, decided to start going out and buying handguns from other companies, rebranding them Mauser and selling them directly themselves. They did this with the Italian firm Renato Gamba, making revolvers, and they did it with FEG in Hungary. Now, this wasn't covert. They just went to FEG and basically said, hey, we'd like to buy some pistols from you, but we want you to mark them Mauser. We'll pay you, and then we'll sell them ourselves under the Mauser banner trade name, which still we think has some value, so hopefully people will buy the guns. They did two different models between 1990 and 1995 with FEG. One was the Model 80 SA, which was just a straight up copy of the Browning High Power, and I have a previous video on that pistol if you're interested in it. The other was the Mauser Model 90 DA, which was the double action offering, as the name implies. This was actually the Hungarian P9R pistol, and that is essentially FEG looking at the Browning High Power and thinking, we like this system, but what if we made it double action? And so starting in 1983, FEG developed its own double action pistol, partially based on the high power, but also partially with elements taken from the Smith & Wesson Model 59. So despite what you may see it referenced as, this isn't just a double action high power. It has a lot of different elements in it. The lockup is different, the trigger mechanism is different. Parts do not interchange between this and the high power, although they do look very similar. And I think that's largely because FEG tried to duplicate, use the same tooling wherever they could. In particular, the slides have a virtually identical profile between, well, the P9 and the P9R, the Mauser 80 and the Mauser 90, the Browning High Power, and this guy. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. We'll pull it apart, and I'll show you it compared to some of the Mauser Model 80 internals. So I mean, if I do this, it sure looks like a high power, but the grip is really definitely more of a Smith & Wesson-y style of thing. You can tell from the trigger coming forward that this has a double action trigger, and then it has a slide mounted safety and decocker. So that's fire position, that's the safe position. You cannot carry it cocked and locked because this decocks it if you try and engage the safety. If we look at the slide on the left, we have Mauserwerke Oberndorf GmbH, same markings you will see on the Mauser Model 80, and of course the Mauser powder barrel logo there. On the right side, we have Model 90 DA, caliber 9 Parabellum. We have a serial number here. The 90 is the model designation, then there's one leading 0, and this has been 10,500 or so in production. This is a gun that was made in 1991. Serial numbers on these will start with 90 00 1001 and go up to 90 00 27,000. So that's what you can expect to see. The magazine on this is a 15-round magazine that sure looks like a high-power magazine. And to compare it, this is a Mauser 80 magazine, which is a Browning high power mag. You can see the 90 is just a little bit taller. The two have their magazine locking notches in the exact same place, but the magazines are not interchangeable in either direction. If you try to use the high power mag in the Model 90, it will lock in place, but it locks in place too low to actually, oh sorry, you can't really see that, but it's too low to actually get cartridges up into the action. I've already disassembled my Mauser 80 high power here, but if I put the Mauser 90 magazine into it, you can see that it jams up against the ejector here without locking into the gun. So that's not really going to work either. They decided to go with a spur hammer on the Mauser 90. The sights are essentially identical to Browning high power sights. It's just a notch and post there. The notch back here is windage adjustable just by drifting it back and forth. Disassembly is just like the high power or basically every other Browning style pistol. Lock the slide, hold the slide back to right about there, and then pop the slide stop pin out. There we go, and then you can put the slide off the front, take out the recoil spring like so. Barrel comes out. It is a Browning tilting barrel style of system, of course. So there's the slide disassembled, and then here's our frame. Now let's compare this to the Mauser 80, the Hungarian high power. First off, the slides, and this is why I think everybody just assumes that the double action gun is just a double action high power, because these things are clearly made on the same tooling. Like the only difference between these slides that you can see is the presence of the decocker on the double action on the Mauser 90. However, we do have one bit of difference up in the slides here, and that is this component right there, which is not present in the double action gun. This is essentially the trigger connector for the high power. So on a high power, when you pull the trigger, you are lifting this lever upwards into the slide. It hits this lever right there, pushes it up, which pushes this end, this little hook, down, which pushes down on this piece right there, which is the sear, and releases the hammer. So in the high power, the trigger mechanism basically goes up into the slide, over, and drops down. You can see that that piece is not present in the double action gun. And that's because in the double action gun, we actually have a stirrup around the magazine well. When you pull the trigger, you're just directly pulling the sear back here. And there it goes. Now, if we look at the barrels, this is our Mauser 80, aka high power. This is our Mauser 90, and this uses a Smith & Wesson Model 59 style of unlocking cam. So in the high power, this hook right here catches in a lug in the frame and pulls the barrel down out of lock when the slide cycles back. On the Smith & Wesson and the Mauser 90, you have a cam right here that catches in a pair of frame rails right there, and that's what pulls the barrel down. So this is going to sit in battery like that, and when the barrel goes backward, it gets pulled downwards. In the high power, it's this lug right here, which, by the way, you can see it on the outside because it's hardened differentially from the rest of the frame. That's it right there. That hook interfaces with, or that lug interfaces with the hook on the barrel, and that is what pulls the barrel down to unlock it. So this will not fit in a Browning high power. A high power barrel will not fit and function in a Mauser Model 90 or an FEG P9R because that unlocking system is different. And then, of course, the trigger mechanism, as you saw, is, in addition to being double action here, it is totally different than the way the high power works. And one little other less relevant difference, I think, these both have a similar recoil spring and the same sort of takedown pin attachment, but the way that the recoil spring locks into the barrel is obviously different. So this has the round peg that's going to lock in to a little slot in the barrel like that. That's the high power, where the Mauser 90 / P9R just sort of, it's a simpler system, just pushes right there. So there you go. There is the Hungarian P9R in its Mauser Model 90 DA guise or appellation, all field stripped for you. FEG manufactured a total of 26,000 of these Mauser Model 90 pistols between 1990 and 1995, plus another 1,200 of a compact version that has a slightly shorter slide. Sorry, I don't have one of those here to show you. But the plan was for Mauser to sell these in Europe, but it didn't really work like they had hoped it would. By the end of 1995, they still had a little over 18,000 of them in inventory out of 26,000 manufactured. this is a problem. So what do you do when you have an overstock of relatively inexpensive handguns? You sell them to the Americans, because the US commercial market will buy basically anything that has a trigger and goes bang most of the time. And so between 95 and 2001, those 18,000 and a little bit more pistols were exported to the US, or were imported into the US by a couple of different import companies, the biggest one being Century, who will pretty much import anything that has a trigger and goes bang most of the time. And that's how they ended up in the US. It is worth pointing out that the US also imported a whole lot of P9R pistols from Hungary, essentially this same thing, but marked with FEG designations instead of Mauser designations. We imported a lot of those. Krasnar, in particular, out of Tennessee, imported gajillions of Hungarian firearms over a couple of decades. So you'll see these in the US as Hungarian pistols, but also as the Mauser branded ones. Now, ultimately, this project didn't solve Mauser's problems. The Mauser 80 was a real failure. They just did not make or sell very many of those at all. The Mauser 90, they made a lot more, but they then had a lot of trouble selling them and had to basically dump them into the US. Ultimately, in 1999, Mauser would solve this problem by just shutting down its small arms division altogether. They sold off the Mauser brand name trademark. It was actually purchased by Sig Sauer. Currently today it is owned by a larger holding company that has Sig Sauer and Mauser and a number of other recognizable legacy firearms brands and trademarks. So thanks to Morpheus for giving me access to this one to film. A big thanks also to Laszlo Betz, who is a Hungarian firearms researcher who gave me some really fantastic insight into the production and the serial numbers of these guys. He is also the author of Headstamp's most recent book, Rifles on the Danube, on Hungarian AK pattern rifles. Fantastic work, exquisite research, and a big thanks to Mr. Betz for help on this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.